Hi folks, welcome to the Brent Bozell Show. I think it's important that we look at what happened at the ABC presidential debate because this is most serious of serious business taking place. And I think that moving forward, some serious decisions need to be made, especially by the Trump campaign. Let me analyze it, and then I'm going to make a couple of recommendations that I think you might like. Let's begin. Who won this debate? I think we have to acknowledge that Kamala Harris won the debate. She was better prepared where the answers were concerned than President Trump was, but she also had a better strategy than he had. And you have to credit her handlers for coming up with this. They know that he's got a thin skin, and they could bait him. And they baited him all night long, and he went for it, especially on questions like his rallies, where he gets very defensive about them, and I would too. But she had an advantage that he didn't have, or better put, her advantage was his disadvantage. She knew from the start that this was going to be a 3-to-1 debate, pile-on. She knew that David Moore and his sidekick were going to have an agenda against him every bit as striking as her own. She knew she was going to be able to lie with impunity or simply dodge any questions that were asked, and there would be no follow-up. There'd be no questioning of her. She knew also that they were going to do the exact opposite with President Trump, and they were going to be her personal hit squad. And that is exactly what happened. Let's start here. Fact-checking. Ask yourself the question, what's the role of a moderator in fact-checking? The answer is none. It is the role of the debater to do the fact-checking. It's the role of the debater to say to his or her opponent, what you said is incorrect, here are the facts. It is the role of the moderator to ask the questions and get out of the way. Now, they did that with Kamala Harris. They didn't fact-check her one single time. But they found a way to fact-check President Trump no less than 6 different times. Let me go through the fact-checking, because what is really striking here is that the fact-checkers themselves needed to be fact-checked, because on a regular basis, both Muir and Davis were telling untruths when they were fact-checking Donald Trump. Number one, Donald Trump said that there was such a thing as post-birth abortion, which is to say that babies were being allowed to die on tables after a botched abortion. Kamala Harris flat out denied that that was true, and in fact, Davis got on her side, and Davis interjected and said also that is simply false. Folks, it is true. Multiple states allow for a baby to die on a table in a botched abortion, including in my own state of Virginia with the former governor of the state of Virginia. Here's a trivia question, by the way. How many of you folks remember that when he was in the state legislature, Barack Obama supported that in Illinois as well? Good trivia question. Another one. When Donald Trump said, and I believe it was that he said there were 20 million illegal aliens, Muir interjected, stepped in and said, that's not true. The number's 11 million. Well, guess what? The number was 11 million at the start of the Biden administration. Since then, there have been estimates, government estimates, that it's up to 9 million people, 11 plus 9 is 20, illegal aliens. Donald Trump was right. The fact check was wrong. Muir argued that it was not true what Donald Trump said about people eating their pets, Haitian immigrants eating their pets in Springfield, Ohio. In fact, and he said because city officials have denied that's true. What else do you expect a city official to say? In fact, numerous residents have been saying, why would numerous residents be lying about this? And I was speaking today with the head of one, I'll say who he is, Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council. And he told me that that story has been out for 3 years. For 3 years, people have been reporting that that's been going on in that part of the country, that Haitian immigrants are in such straits that they have been eating their pets. That's the truth. So the fact check was incorrect. Another one. They claimed when Donald Trump said that crime was up, Muir cut him off, interjected. That's not true. Crime has not gone up, and he cited an FBI report. David Muir is probably the last person in America who believes the FBI. But in fact, what David Muir didn't tell the audience was that this FBI report excluded some of the top cities in the United States for no reason whatsoever. Kind of like the inflation report that excluded the cost of food and the cost of energy, i.e. gasoline, your home heating, your home electricity. That was all taken out of the inflation data. This is the Biden administration, so that fact check was incorrect. Muir interrupted, this is an interesting one, he interrupted Trump to correct him and to say that numerous judges had in fact ruled that the elections in 2020 were not going to be thrown out, the election results. Now, that's true. But that was the role of Kamala Harris, for her to make that point, not for David Muir to interject and say, I'm going to fact check this one. Finally, when Kamala Harris, when Donald Trump was trying to make the argument that Kamala Harris doesn't know how to negotiate, what he meant to say was that she didn't negotiate well with Zelensky. And he said Putin. And Trump talked about when she met with Zelensky, when she said when she met with Putin, when he meant Zelensky. Now, David Muir should have said nothing, but instead he turned around and he pitched her a softball fact check by saying to her, you've never met with Putin, have you? That was his way of fact checking him by giving a softball to her. This is the kind of stuff that was going on all night long against Donald Trump from these two, quote unquote, impartial moderators, with none of it happening to her. So how were they dealing with her? Was there a fact checking that should have been taking place with Kamala Harris? Let me go through some of the questions and what they could have and in fact should have done if they were going to be fact checking. Let's go through the questions they asked her. The first question David Muir asked her, when it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? Perfectly straightforward, fair question to ask. She talked about how her plan was a $50,000 tax deduction for small businesses. Then she attacked him, Donald Trump, for having a tax cut that only benefited billionaires, and then another 20% tax cut on everyday sales. She attacked him for that. That was her answer. Analysis. She never answered the question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Secondly, on the answers that she gave, it's absolutely untrue that Donald Trump had a tax cut just for billionaires. And it's also untrue about this 20% tax cut in the misleading sense that's a tariff. Those tariffs were kept by the Biden-Harris administration. So in fact, she's attacking herself. So should they have fact-checked her? Should they have said to her, Vice President Harris, you didn't answer the question. Please answer the question. Do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? That didn't happen. Second question. It was a follow-up to the first one. He asked her, when she said that when Donald Trump responded by saying, wait a minute, they kept my tariffs in place, he asked her, how do you respond to that? Tough question. How do you respond? She ended up by talking about how he was basically a pal of President Xi in China. And then she went on to say, and this is one of the most extraordinary things that I've heard in a very long time, that he said that, she said, we know that China was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID. And Trump was not strong enough about that. I don't know, folks. Do you remember the Wuhan virus? Do you remember every single time Donald Trump said it was the Wuhan virus, how Kamala Harris and all the left-wingers savaged him for saying that? And now suddenly she's attacking him for not being tough on China on COVID. What should have been the follow-up? Vice President Harris, A, you didn't answer the question. Number two, how can you be saying that sort of stuff when it's not true? Another question. She was asked, do you support a woman's right, any restrictions on a woman's right to have an abortion? Now, this is just a simple black and white question. Do you support any restrictions on it? Kamala Harris said, I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The answer should have been, Vice President Harris, you didn't answer the question. The question was, do you support any restrictions on abortion? And additionally, this is kind of interesting, Donald Trump then tried, and he said to her, because he knows the answer is no, and it would be devastating if her response was that she supports all abortion at all time for any reason, at any age, paid for by the American taxpayer, which Roe v. Wade did not include. So he asked her the question, are there any restrictions that you would support? And he was cut off. You were cut off and continued because they had to get on to the next question, which was, they asked about border security. And he asked the question, it was a good question. He asked her why the Biden administration waited for 6 months before the election to come up with a bill on border security. And would she have done anything different from President Biden? She talked about how, her answer was how Donald Trump was against their bill and wanted to kill their bill and yada, yada, yada. Analysis. Number one, she never answered the question, why did you wait until 6 months before the election? Also, she didn't point out the fact that you don't need a bill to do something about the border. Don't you remember that one of the very first acts when he came to office by Joe Biden was to stop the construction of the bill? They could have just turned around and said, we're going to restart the construction of the bill. And we're going to do several other things that they could have done through executive action. They didn't need a bill. Should she have been corrected on that? Of course she should have been. They were deadly silent. No question about that. Another question, and this was the one good question that was asked all night long of Kamala Harris. And this came from Davis. She said, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed? Very good question. Her answer was that in 2020, she made it very clear that she would not ban fracking. And she went on to say that they had the biggest oil production, and she went on talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and more of an egg salad sandwich answer on that. What should have been the response from Davis to her? It should have been Vice President Harris. I asked you a question. You never explained why you flip-flopped on fracking, which you did. You never explained why you changed your mind on buyback programs. And you never explained why you decriminalized unauthorized border crossings. So I'm going to ask you again, why did you change your position on all three of them? Never brought that thing up. And by the way, she lied. Kamala Harris lied when she said that in the 2020 election, she was opposed to fracking. But there was a better question to ask on that, and it's a question that should have been raised at this point. The Green New Deal. Kamala Harris was a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, the biggest, most expensive bill in the history of the Republic that would take away more human freedom than any government act ever instituted by any country anywhere in the world in human history. One of the basic fundamental conditions for the Green New Deal was ending fracking and ending fossil fuel exploration, even having electric car mandates. Now, in this campaign, Kamala Harris has reversed her position on all three of those. So, the question that should have been put to her, and it would have been an absolutely fair question to her, would have been, Vice President Harris, you were one of the sponsors, co-sponsors of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal requires ending fossil fuel energy. It requires an end to fracking. It requires electric vehicle mandates. You now have reversed your position. So which one is it? Do you support the Green New Deal or do you support your new positions? Because if you support your new positions, you can no longer support the Green New Deal. Vice President Harris, are you prepared to say now to the American people, you no longer support the Green New Deal? Yes or no? That would have been an excellent question to ask. They never asked that question. Another question on Israel. She was asked what she said, President Biden has not been able to break the stalemate that's taking place in Israel right now in the war. And she was asked by Davis, what would you do differently? Her answer was, again, she said, this war has to end. It has to end immediately. There has to be a ceasefire deal. We need to have the hostages out. We must have a course for a two-state solution. One thing I will always assure you, I always give Israel the ability to defend itself. Analysis. She never answered the question. Yet again, she was asked, what would you do differently? She never answered the question. There was she wasn't called out for that by either one of the moderators. Note, by the way, that same question was put to Donald Trump, and he was attacked for not being specific enough in his answers. Another question. She was asked by Muir, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin? And would it be any different than what we're seeing from President Biden? Fair question, not a hard question. But the answer was that she attacked Donald Trump, saying that he was just going to give up in the war in Ukraine. Dodge. She never answered the question. No follow-up, no rejoinder to Vice President Harris, saying, Vice President Harris, you never answered our question. What's the answer? What would you do with Vladimir Putin? Another one, and this one's a good one. She was asked, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way the Afghanistan withdrawal played out? Her answer was to say, first she said that she agreed with Biden's decision to pull out. And then she went on to say that there's not one member in the United States military who is in active duty in combat in any war zone around the world. And it's the first time in a century. Once again, she didn't answer the question when she was asked, do you feel you bear any responsibility for the disaster in Afghanistan? Secondly, she flat out lied about there not being an active service member. There are 2 active war zones where there are American service members involved. And in fact, she ought to have been asked if she was willing to prepare to tell the families of the 3 American servicemen who were killed in Iraq in January that there isn't an active war zone going on. They should have asked that question. They never did. Here's one that I think is one of the greatest softball questions I've ever heard seen pitched. Donald Trump made a statement about her ethnicity on the campaign trail, and he was called out on it during the debate. Should he have said that? He gave his answer. Now, they turned to Harris, and their Muir's answer on that, his follow-up to her was, Vice President Harris, what are your thoughts? This was a pitch over the plate inviting her to call him a racist. She obliged. She called him a racist. Another one, she was asked about her position in 2017 where she supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private health insurance and to create a completely government-run healthcare system. And then Davis went on to say, 2 years later, you propose a plan to include a private insurance option. What's your plan today? That was not the right question to have asked. It was not, what is your plan today? The question to have asked is, which plan of yours are you going to stand by because you've reversed yourself yet again? Why are you reversing yourself? Why did you believe that in 2017? What made you change your mind other than the fact that the American people are unbelievably not on your side on this? But she was just asked to explain herself, what her plan was today. A complete dodge when she gave her answer, where she said, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, supported private health care options. I completely dodged the question. Finally, she was asked, what would she do to fight climate change? And her answer was that, well, the former president said that the climate change is a hoax, and what we know is that it's very, very real. And then she went on to say that they have created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. Okay, but that's not the question. The question was, what would you do to fight climate change? She didn't answer the question. And the 800,000 manufacturing jobs, I still haven't figured out what that has to do with climate change. Here's your bottom line on it. Kamala Harris was asked 13 questions in the debate. 3 of them were absolute softballs that didn't require any policy answers. The other 10 dealt with policies. In all 10 questions, not once did Kamala Harris come up and deliver a concrete policy position, a comprehensive, concrete policy prescription. Not once did she do it, and not once did they call her out. That's how loaded this debate was. Okay, what else could they have done? There are all manner of issues out there where the public, most especially Democrats, had no idea before this debate where she stood on all these issues. ABC, Muir, and his sidekick could have, if they had wanted, Muir and Davis could have asked serious questions and asked her to give serious answers. Example, 71% of Democrats don't know that Kamala Harris has supported cutting funding for the police. They should have asked her why and to explain herself. 71% of Democrats have no idea that Kamala Harris supports paying reparations payments to atone for slavery. 71% of Democrats don't know that she has endorsed that radical position. She should have been asked. 72% of Democrats don't know that since being named the border czar, Kamala Harris has never once gone to a conflict zone on the border. Not once in almost 4 years has she inspected a conflict zone in the border as border czar. No questions on that. 77% of Democrats have no idea that she supports abolishing ICE. 77%. Don't you believe that the media should have asked her? Don't you believe that Muir and Davis should have asked her during the debate to explain why she wants to abolish ICE? 78% of Democrats have no idea that Kamala Harris participated in a legal defense fund to raise money for rioters, BLM rioters, in 2020 who burned down cities all over this country. They have no idea, more than 3/4 of the Democrats have no idea that she did that. The American people don't know. Don't you think that ABC should have asked that question? 86% of Democrats don't know that she believes that death row inmates ought to be given the right to vote. Shouldn't the media, shouldn't ABC have asked her why she supports that? But then here's the really interesting one. On the morning of the debate, there was a breaking news story on CNN, reported elsewhere as well, about a 2019 questionnaire that they'd gotten their hands on, where she had filled out a questionnaire for the ACLU, where she had taken positions on a number of issues. The answers, some of the answers, were so radical as not to be believed, including having the government pay for transgender surgeries for illegal immigrants. Just think about that one for a second. But even bigger than that, legalizing all drugs. When you think about the crystal meth epidemic, when you think about heroin, when you think of those kind of drugs and you see the devastation all over America's streets, and in this questionnaire that came out the morning of the debates, that she wanted to legalize all of them. That was not just a news story, that was an incredible question that should have been asked of her. Not one of those questions was asked. Okay, so here's the bottom line. What should Donald Trump do now? Kamala Harris has immediately said she would do a second debate. Why not? If you're going to get that kind of result, why not do it? But she has. What should be Donald Trump's response? I'm going to suggest this. Number one, Donald Trump, and I've been saying this nonstop, I won't stop saying this, whoever it was, Donald Trump talked during the debate about when you have incompetent staff, you fire them. Whoever recommended that he do that debate on ABC should be fired. It was about the worst decision that could have been made. We came out with a survey which we released that showed in the first 100 days of this campaign with Kamala Harris, the coverage from ABC News, from David Muir's ABC News, had been 100% positive with Kamala Harris at a time when she was refusing to do any press conferences, doing no press interviews. Nobody was reporting on her record. They could have reported on her record. This would have been nothing but negative to her because the American people are completely opposed to this. Yet she got 100% positive coverage. At the same time, during that 100 days, what happened with Donald Trump? One, he went through an extraordinary convention. Everybody raved about it. Two, he named J.D. Vance, which got rave reviews as well. Third, he was shot in the head. I'm going to repeat that. Donald Trump was shot in the head. You would think there would be some sympathetic coverage to the man about that. 96% negative coverage during the same time period for Donald Trump. 96. He got shot in the head, 96% negative news coverage. What should he do? If I were the guy who was giving the advice to Donald Trump, I would tell him to state flatly, unequivocally, he will never do another broadcast or cable network debate again, ever. Full stop. They don't want to do it on Fox. He won't do it anywhere else. Full stop. Secondly, he won't do a debate that is moderated by any journalist in America today. The days of the great Tim Russert, who was a liberal Tip O'Neill supporter, but was as impartial as he could possibly be when he moderated Meet the Press. The days of Brit Hume, when he was at ABC, folks, those days are over. These people, the only thing that was missing was Kamala Harris for president buttons on Muir's and his sidekicks' lapels. During the debate. He should refuse to do any. I've got a proposal. The only network I would do it on, by the way, is C-SPAN. C-SPAN, okay. I'm going to suggest something. When Sean Hannity began his career at Fox, you will remember the show was Hannity and Combs. And here's how it went. Sean Hannity would go first with the conservative guest. He would pitch a softball over the plate for the conservative guest to hit out of the park. And then he would turn to the liberal guest and he would throw him a barn burner hardball on the same question. Then Alan Colmes would follow up. He would go to that liberal guest who just had that hardball thrown at him, and he'd pitch him a softball for him to hit it out of the park, and then turn on the conservative, and he'd go with the hardball on the conservative. And they would do that question after question after question. In every instance, because I did that show many, many times, in every instance, you knew when Sean Hannity was going to ask you a question, he was going to give you a nice question, and you were going to have to be on your best behavior with Colmes, because Colmes wasn't going to let you get away with anything. He was going to hit you with a hardball. I'm going to propose that that format be followed with the next debates. Let there be someone that Donald Trump who elects to be his moderator on his side. Let Kamala Harris choose her moderator on her side. Have that format. Follow that format. Let Donald Trump choose Sean Hannity if he wants to. Let her choose David Muir if she wants to. Let them follow that format. What's going to happen if each side is allowed 6 questions? What's going to happen is that in every instance, the American people are going to be able to hear 2 things. One is the candidate put forward their policy, and the second one have to answer for their policies. And that's what you want. That's what has to happen if you're going to have a fair debate. But America saw in this debate exactly what Donald Trump, exactly what every conservative is up against today. This is not a biased liberal media any longer. These people are, as we have been saying, the tip of the spear of the Democratic Party. They are the tip of the spear of the radical left. You saw it in this debate. Folks, you must tell your neighbor who says that that was a fair debate, that this was one of the most unfair debates in the history of presidential debates. You must also demand, as a viewer, that these outlets shape up their acts, and you must endorse, I think, the proposition that never again will a conservative agree to undergo that kind of hostile fire. Thank you.